The following podcast is part of the MindBodySpirit.fm podcast network.
Being a marketer's no sweat. You just have to manage dozens of channels, launch hundreds of campaigns, score thousands of leads, and okay, fine, it's a lot of sweat. Unless you have HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools to help you do all that and more. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
Wholeness means to me being in a state of joy.
Wholeness means feeling complete, owning my authentic gifts.
Wholeness is really connected. Everything is connected to everything.
Wholeness is where we have access to all parts of ourselves.
Okay, so can you see it? Something's blocking my view. So today's card that I picked is from Self-Care Oracle, and it's called Practice Optimism. I like that. Let's see what it has to say. This is a fairly simple oracle set, but it's very unique, I think.
Yes, that is cool.
So the interpretation is when things are tough, it's easy to feel sorry for yourself or to focus on bad events. But mindset is everything in this world. And if you can nudge yourself to be more optimistic, amazing benefits will follow. Optimists report being happier in life, living longer, being more relaxed, having strong feelings of self-worth, and having better relationships than pessimists. All it takes is positive thinking. So the practice is take note of the language you use when you talk to yourself in your head. How do you frame events? If it veers negative, try speaking to yourself more kindly. You can't expect others to treat you better than you treat yourself. Also, try writing in a gratitude journal. List about 3 things every day that you're grateful for. Or write about situations that were difficult for you, but through which you came out stronger. That's interesting because I've thought of myself as a pessimist for a really long time. But I actually think I might be an optimist. No.
Well, I love this. There was a quote, I don't remember who said it, but it was like, whether the glass is half full or half empty, you're not going to go thirsty.
Yeah.
It's like, and I don't know. I think it's just
But then it's the stress of the pessimist thinking it's half empty, all worried about it being more empty.
Right.
That's not good.
That's the work to do, I guess, because the thing is like, so the pessimist has to do the work to not worry all the time, but the positive person, the optimist, has got to like do the work to say sometimes it's not okay and we need help. Do you know what I mean? Like they both have work to do.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you can't be like, oh, it'll be fine. Sometimes you've got to be like, you've got to work from a different place and be like, it's not fine. We need help. So They both have work to do.
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
Yeah, I like that. So this podcast has kind of been on my mind for a good while. In fact, I wanted to start with, so in 2016 was when I got my Reiki training, was in 2016. And I put a note in my phone and I found it again today. And I had, I started counting when I would edit it because I'd kind of edit it. And so I edited it. So January 1st, 2017. So I know I created this in 2016. So this was, and it was just caution for energy workers is what I called it, because I could see, I'm like, okay, we've got to be careful here. There's things we got to be careful from. And so I wrote down, this was just my thoughts. I said, most people come to like energy work or metaphysical or things like that when everything else has failed.
Yeah.
When they are at their most vulnerable, they come here. And sometimes it is the pattern for workers or the practitioners to tell the clients what to do. And they use their gifts and they wow the client, and it feels so good to finally have like that hope, right?
And validation.
And for some people, even some, a little bit of like supernatural help, it's like a little bit of magic can come and take this all away, a little bit of fairy tale even, which it is, it is magical, but also, in that painful place, it's just, please take this away, right? Please just take this away. And so this practitioner comes in and they have these gifts and it just kind of wows us. And then we kind of just turn our agency over to these practitioners because it's like, just tell me what to do. You know what I mean? Like it's so easy And it feels so good. I said, it feels so good to have a partner running this life with you, because it's been so chaotic. I mean, because to get to the end of your rope it's a long fall, you know what I mean? So you
Right.
come here kind of desperate. So then we kind of teach the concept. One of the first things that they'll do is like, you create your life, you determine your destiny, which is empowering in some way, but it's also sometimes has the notion of, so all that you're dealing with right now is all your fault a little bit. It comes out that way sometimes.
Oh,
And because what happens sometimes is then practitioners I've worked with, I've seen and, worked with them and worked beside them. It's like, then when something else happens, oh, it's you must have a block. It's you that's the problem, which is a slippery slope, right? Like it's true. And yet, we just have to be careful.
but then doesn't
Because,
that also create dependency on that person? Because like, oh,
right.
it's a problem, then you got to come to me,
Mm-hmm.
and it's this cycle.
Yep. Yeah.
Mm.
So I wrote the remedy. So this is what, because I could see this like this dynamic and this problem. So this is the remedy I came up with. I said the first line of energy work needs to be developing the client's knowing, intuition, and sensitivity to vibrations so they can know the truth for themselves. Like that should be the number one thing a practitioner does, is help you know truth for yourself.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because when I started doing Reiki, I wanted to add pulling oracle cards into it at the end. And I've told them, like, my goal, I will pull these cards for you, but my goal for you is to
Mhm.
feel your own intuition, to see what you feel. Like, I'll help you get there, but I can't think of a better gift to give someone than helping
Mhm.
them understand themselves.
Yeah. Right. And that's what I, in a one-on-one session, if I'm in person, the first thing we'll do is I have boxes of oils. And what I like about that is like they have meaning. So I have them muscle tests for themselves. I teach them. I've never had, I've had little 14-year-olds. I've had like 22-year-old men, like I've had people all over the spectrum of people come, and I teach them how to muscle test, which I am not a huge muscle tester. I don't muscle test for everything like some people do. They muscle test for, is this food good for me? And I'm not great at muscle testing myself. In fact, when I pick an oil myself, I have a different means, but I know that this works for the moment. And we just do kind of the sway method. And I just tell them, I said, okay, we're going to trust that you know what you need. And so I practice at first. I have them say their name and they kind of pull forward, and then I have them say another name that's wrong, and they kind of fall back. And so many times they look at me like, what is that? Like, let's try it again, let's try something else. And it works. It just, because our intention is there. And so then I have these oils. I don't sit and have them look at these oils. They don't even look at them, but I have like 4 boxes, and I say, okay, is the oil you need in box 1? And they'll tell me, they'll say no, or yes. And okay, is it in row 1? Yes or no. And we narrow it down to an oil. And then I read the description of what the emotional things are. And I haven't had, well, I had one man, he was a middle-aged attorney. It was so funny. And he said, so wouldn't they all kind of match? Wouldn't they all kind of work? And I said, turn the page to the next one, and just read the next one. And within like 3 sentences, okay, no. He was like, okay, no. Okay. And you could tell he was just like, what do I do with this? But that's the thing, is like, we are so ingrained in having power outside of ourselves that we're like, what does this mean? Like we want to categorize it and put it somewhere. And also, the last thing I would write down too is like, if you watch like some of the most famous psychics, even, right? They will tell you, like, they have a library, a symbol library, a library of symbols, and they'll be like, I'm seeing this. Does that make what that usually means this or that? And still, even a psychic sees things from their own perspective. That's just in order for us to have we lose our own agency if I can see everybody else's point of view. I still have a point of view, even if I have gifts. Does that make sense? I still have my point of view. So when I'm working with a client, I have to be mindful that my experiences, I am still going to see through things through my own lens. And I have to be very careful to not impose my lens onto someone else, because to be human is to have bias. And so we have to recognize, so I said that we have to give space for our error. So that's why, me, I'm always ask questions rather than ask questions, because that helps create the room for that perspective, because like I say, you watch the biggest psychics, they're really just not telling them their life. They're interpreting through their own lens, and they're good at it, but it's still their own lens. They're still their own perspectives.
Yeah. Or what I was thinking about is when you were talking about that is maybe from a metaphysical side, it's almost like you're lending a little bit of your vibration to them to give them the little oomph they need to trust themselves. And maybe it's not that, but
yeah,
I love that idea of like, I couldn't do that by myself, but with a
right.
practitioner, I did. I gave either the permission or the added help that their gifts gave. It just adds that extra bit. That's why sometimes you need an outside person.
Yeah,
Not to
it's
tell
true.
you what to do. It's just to validate and to help.
Well,
Right?
yeah, yes, because I say that all, like, in all my trainings, like especially in heart center therapy training that I took, I mean, there is a script. I mean, it is scripted. Like, you could just sit and read the script. So, but if I just sat there and read the script myself, it's just not as powerful as if someone else is reading the script for me. There's something about having a witness. There's something about having someone walk the road with you that is just super powerful. It's just really powerful. And we just got to give credit to that power, rather than the practitioner. If the practitioner wants to hold that power, that's where I'm a little bit of like skeptical, like a little bit of skeptical with people that are really toting their gifts, like, this is what I do. And
Yeah. It's a warning. It's a little bit of a warning sign. So that leads us to the topic, I guess, of today is
yeah,
when
help hurts.
help hurts. I like
That's just how I did it, because it is something that happens. It happens more than I would like. And it started off, there was a famous case, or a famous story that came about, Jodi Hildebrandt and then Ruby Franke. You might have heard the story. Ruby Franke was like she was a YouTuber that had millions of followers and had all her kids, and she was kind of a strict mom, and she was already kind of
start out strict.
What's that?
Did she start out really strict, or was that something that she developed?
I think she was a little more strict. So the story, or the example I was shown, was her little girl was, I think kindergarten, maybe first grade, just young, and she had forgotten her lunch, and her teacher had called home to say, hey, she forgot her lunch. And Ruby was like, well, the only way she'll learn, she's got to learn that she's got to remember her lunch. So she wasn't going to bring it to her, and the teacher
And
was.
she said not to feed her, not to give her food.
Right. That's right. Yes. So kind of let her suffer, and so I think that was a little before. If I might be wrong, but
That's what I
I
was
think
wondering
that
if
was
it
a little
was before
before.
Jodi or after, but I don't know.
Yeah, because I know that there was controversy. People would comment like, you're a horrible mom, kind of a thing, quite a bit. So, but it got in the news when a little boy showed up at a neighbor's house knocking on the door. And I mean, if you watch the YouTube videos of it, it's just heartbreaking. He's just, hi, sorry to bother you, just he's like, I just need some help. I need some help. And he had escaped from Jodi Hildebrandt's home in Ivins, Utah. And Just a little bit about her. So she is a licensed mental health therapist based in Utah and founder of Connections, a counseling organization that claims to help individuals, couples, and families achieve emotional and psychological health from her website. Her
Which that
methods
all
have,
sounds really good. That all sounds really,
right,
yeah.
totally. Her methods have been criticized for being overly harsh and rigid. She has been known to promote extreme views on personal accountability and relationships with which former clients have described as manipulative and damaging. Um, there have been reports that her therapy sessions have led to isolation from families and friends, and that she uses fear and shame as tools in her practice. So in 2023, her name became more known as she was linked to Ruby Frankie. So that's when they started coming together, was in 2023. And she was already facing public criticism for strict parenting methods, Ruby was, but they came together and implemented principles of parenting together. They kind of worked together. And they were arrested after the 12-year-old boy escaped from Hildebrandt's home in a desperate and dire state. The boy was described as emaciated with open wounds and duct tape around his wrist and ankles, which sadly the duct tape was there not as much as the punishment as because they would get like bruises and cuts because of the restraints they were given. So they put the duct tape on to like help that.
Awesome. Well, have you heard the call from the guy that,
Yes.
like, he's so emotional. Like, he realized, oh, that is heartbreaking to me.
Yeah, his sound of it, the visibly, you can tell he's this big manly man. Like when he comes to the door, he's like, "What do you want?" He's kind of ornery. And then on the phone, because they have the doorbell footage on the phone, he's just like breaking down. Like he's like, "This kid needs help." And so the police came, and then they went to Hildebrandt's home, found another little girl. I don't know if you saw this, but the policeman went, and she was stuck in this little closet room down in the basement of this house. It was this gigantic house. And she was just in one little closet sitting there with the door closed, the light off. And when they found her, she was so scared. The police officer just sat with her, and they sat there for, I think it was 6 or 7 hours. Just, it's okay. And she didn't want to move. She thought it was like a trick, right? She thought it was a test. So she wanted some pizza. So they went and got some pizza, and she ate the whole thing. And then they went and they got more, and she ate, but he just sat there with her. I'm just going to sit here with you. It's okay, for hours and hours.
He must have been trained. Like, God bless that police force.
No kidding.
Because I don't know that I would even know what to do in that situation.
Yep. Yeah, you can't just convince them to not be afraid, you know. And so finally she agreed to come with them. But I think, and the last I heard is both of these women they did plead guilty. I heard they pled guilty to all sorts of accounts of abuse and things. But it was just one of those things where it's tender to me when somebody that's supposed to help is the one that's hurt. You know, it almost feels like it's a double hurt, right? It's like it's a double wound. And I felt like it was important to kind of, call it out, a little bit, and help people because, just like that little girl, 6-7 hours sitting there, and Jodi wasn't even in the room. The damage was done, in another way. And so maybe we can, if that's what we can work on is that sense of self, or that self-empowerment, so that people can know when their help is hurtful, because there's an authority figure there. That's an authority type figure. And so you usually default to an authority. Right. And we have to know, we have to have our that there's an authority within ourselves that needs to be first and foremost. I don't care who the authority is, we have to have that sense of self. And
it's so scary to me, because all of that stuff even if you go all the way to any cultish kind of thing, all
Mhm.
things start out in such a good place.
Yes.
And that's what's so confusing. That's what's so scary, is because sometimes you get involved in something that started out honestly pretty good, pretty
Right.
helpful, pretty on the up and up, and then things just start to snowball. And I think sometimes we just get stuck in that snowball and this avalanche, and we don't
Yeah.
know how to get out.
Right. So that's the Jodi Hildebrandt story that it just kind of, and Ruby Frankie, that just kind of, was, there's plenty of other stories. I mean, there's a lot of stories there's a lady that had this juice fast that she would make everybody take, and it was like so full of salt, but she would tell them it would get rid of things in their, in their systems, and it's just that. But the most important thing to me when I hear these stories is that the client or the person seeking help is hurting, in pain, suffering, right? They're already suffering. And and sometimes that resistance to the suffering, the needing that suffering to be gone, which I totally get, can lead us into, a place where we're desperate, and I get it. Like, I mean, when you're suffering, nobody can say, it doesn't help to say suffering's part of life, like that's just dismissive, but I think but before we get to the suffering, that's when we talk about it. We talk about that life is hard. Life has difficulties, and we spend, we don't believe that. We don't. We think things have to be great. That is like our barometer to if we're a good person. You know what I mean? If things are going well in our life, we make that the barometer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the truth is difficult things happen, you know what I mean? And so to me, that's one step that can cause somebody um, to be, uh, you know, susceptible to people that are maybe not the greatest, is because they have this outside, it's called other esteem, a little bit, where it's like things on the outside of me determine my worth.
Okay.
And so then it's like, okay, this is something's going on, something's not working there. I'm suffering. I need this to go away. I need this to stop. And it's kind of a franticness. And so then this person comes in and they're like, I can make your suffering stop like that. And they promise, they promise things. And
So is that the warning sign then? Because you're so susceptible that I don't think you're looking out for
right,
something like that. So
right.
is it like, would you say that it's really, really hard to avoid people like that when you're in a situation because you can't see it? Or do you think that there's ways that when you're low, things that you can see? Like, do you think it's that promise of I can fix you?
Yeah. So some of the things I wrote down are like, the red flags. Here's some red flags. One, too good to be true, right? Too good to be true is a red flag. If someone says you come see me and I can change your life in an hour, you know what I mean? Like, I could have an experience where my life changes in an hour with somebody, but if they tell me, there's a difference between that's my experience and they tell me I'm going to change your life in an hour. Do
Okay.
you see the difference there?
Yeah.
It says be skeptical of any treatment that claims to be a cure-all, um, like these, it's a balance, because you hear these wonderful, amazing stories. But that's the thing, to me, because I was there. I wanted that miracle. I wanted somebody to come in and just take out this stuff and make it go away. Like, I wanted it to all just go back to the way it was. Nothing, like, just stop. I was suffering. I mean, I have, my closet floor carpet was probably just tear stained for a long time, for years. And I really just wanted it to go away, and that I was a little frantic to make it go away.
Yeah.
And instead, what I found through the hard way, was really a growth process. And that's the thing, is like, if somebody was going through that, I wouldn't say to them, hey, you're going to grow from this. It's going to be so great for you. Not when they're suffering.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's another thing. If the practitioner needs to be with, with their client, not make their client come with them. There's that empathy needs to be there. The word empowerment, which is why we're doing it this month. I mean, you should walk out of sessions empowered. And there are things called truth bombs. There's things where, like my therapist, I've had practitioners where there's a truth bomb. It's like, oh, that's, where you kind of like are seen a little too much, that more than you want to be seen, that truth bomb. But there should be, those truth bombs should be less often than a feel good bomb or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what to call it.
Well, and a lot of times I think you discover them on your own. Sometimes you can't. But I think sometimes if you're with a good practitioner, they help you to see it. And then you see it yourself.
Yes. Much better if you find out, if you're like, oh, that's what's going on.
And that's empowering. That is empowering, being able to see yourself in a different light, I think.
Yep.
Even though it hurts a little.
Right. Even though it hurts a little. I think also the other thing I wrote down is if it seems like they're trying to wow you, if it feels like that they're trying to wow you, I would say take a break. Do you know what I mean? Like you're already in that session, finish out the session and then pause and see how you feel. And hey, if you feel all great and it was great, fantastic. But just pause because that was another thing. I would go to conferences and you'd get very much caught into like, well, what certifications do you have? Well, I do this and I do this, and people started to create their own, and some of those energy conferences I would go to were some of the most icky energy I'd ever had because it was a lot of ego. There's just a lot of ego that can happen in those spaces. Which is a sign.
When that ego becomes too big, even maybe if you're a practitioner yourself and you recognize yourself feeling a little bit more ego, maybe that's a chance to just take a step back and wonder if you're at your highest good, or I don't know how to say it.
Get curious. Yeah, get curious. The other thing is fear-based things. If you hear a practitioner say, if you don't, or you better, or you have to, even should is kind of iffy sometimes, because the truth is, this is my bias. I'm going to tell you right now, this is my bias. But in my, in training with IFS, all parts of us are valid, important, and welcome. Okay. So if you came to me and, there's very little that you could tell me you did that I would say, that I again, even though I mean, as a practitioner, if I have a reaction in my body to what you're doing, that's my stuff. That's hitting my stuff. And so things that you do shouldn't create activation in my body as a practitioner. And that, I think that happens a lot with practitioners. They're like, oh, I feel not good, then that's not right. But there's a difference. And I think that happens a lot, that they mistake their own activation for what's going on, their own wounds, for the truth of what it should be. You know what I mean?
That's really interesting. I had a therapist, so she wasn't necessarily like an energy worker or anything, but
therapist too. Yep.
Yeah, I could tell, like I remember sharing something with her, and at that moment I could tell something within her switched, that defense came up. And, maybe it's because I am highly sensitive, but I was thinking like, oh, this isn't safe to share here. I can't do. And I wish it would have been.
Yep. Right.
But had the tables been reversed, I don't know if I would even know how to do that.
Right.
Or how to shield myself from that.
Well, and that's the thing is like, that's a good thing. That will happen. You know what I mean? Like we have our stuff. It will get activated. So in this training that I'm almost done taking, it's been like 9 months. That's mostly what we're talking about, is like when that activation comes up in a session, to recognize our own activation and say, and to kind of do this inner work that's like, okay, sweet, you treat these activations, these parts of yourself, like little children that you love and take care of. It's like, I hear you, I feel you, we can talk about that later. And that work, that's got to be happening all the time, because your own activation is what causes, that can be something that causes this kind of damage.
Well, malpractice, right? I think that causes malpractice.
Yeah. And so you have to be so careful. And it's just interesting. I was on a call earlier this week with hundreds of therapists, they're asking questions, and one of the therapists, was struggling, and I get it. It's hard. She's like, I have this client, like, it's just not going anywhere. It's just not doing anything. She's just resists. She just says, and of course it's not fun to have a client who's like a 16-year-old little girl saying, you're not helping me at all. You're just da, 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 da. What do I do? What do I do? And the facilitators of the call, are trying to gently just, be with her, because she's getting activated. Even though somebody is screaming and yelling at you, of course you're going to have activation, but that's your activation, and it comes because of all the stuff that has happened before, And so it was just kind of an interesting little seeing it in real life, and the therapist did not get it. She was just like, how do I make this girl better? How do I make this girl better? And they were just trying to say, be with her, and just what if it takes 10 years? Okay. Like, why is that activating to you? And so being aware of our own activations. And that's the thing I think happens in sometimes energy sessions, is we turn off and we want the practitioner to do that for us. And some of them are happy to do that, but I don't think it's helpful. I don't
think it's healing.
It's not healing.
I don't think it's healing at all. I think it's temporary.
Right.
For a minute.
So I think, I don't always walk out of my therapist's office empowered, but overall, that's the goal, is to that word empowered. Do I feel empowered to move forward? And that should be, especially, a therapist is another way. An energy worker, you should feel good leaving there shouldn't be shame. If you're walking out of the office feeling shame, if you're walking out of the office feeling fear, if you're walking out of the office feeling angry or very much one emotion that's very big, that's called a trauma response. That's not healing. We usually have these, we usually are in a complexity if our emotions are like, just like we said before, it's like those truth bombs. Oh, they hurt, or when we figure out what we've done wrong, it's like, it hurts, but it's good. It's like, it hurts, but it was helpful. Usually it's complexity, but if we come out like feeling like, oh, I've got to do this, or I'm going to get in trouble, or something's going to go wrong, that's just a red flag. I would just say that's a red flag.
There's a therapy office, and my husband and I were trying to find a marriage therapist, and we picked a couple different places to go. Anyway, I called this place, and they did this extensive interview, very validating, and very like, we want to help you. So we went to this first session, and this guy introduced himself and it was like, hey, tell us a little bit about your problems. And you could feel my husband and I were both just escalating. And then he looked at his watch. He's like, okay, I think I can cure you in 16 sessions.
Oh gosh.
Not fix you. He said, I think we can get this done in 16 sessions. So why don't you go up to the front and you can talk about payment schedules. And if you could imagine, my husband and I sprayed electric wires,
right?
Like, so activated, and we were like expected to go and like schedule all these sessions, talk about how much money we were going to spend on this. It was the worst experience I've ever had in a therapist's office. And we told them, we're like, we refuse. We don't want to do this. And they were can we call you and ask you questions about why you didn't want to do this? And I was like, no, I don't want to talk to you. And my husband ended up talking to them a little bit about it. but
Mhm.
they were
Mhm.
so confused. They thought that was the best way to handle things. And maybe that our situation was really unique, but
Mhm.
if you're a practitioner and you're looking at your watch and some
Mhm.
people are obviously suffering, how can you not give them
Mhm.
at least some sort of meditation or something like that to
Mhm.
calm
Mhm.
them down a little bit and say,
Right.
or the meditation of like, let's put this in a box. Let's care about this. This is important.
Right.
Nothing. And
Wow. Well, and he was claiming authority. He was
yes,
claiming authority. I can help you in this many sessions. He was claiming and almost demanding an authority figure in your life. And that's not what as practitioners, we walk with you, not in front of you, like dragging you. That just doesn't work. And yeah, I mean, I've been, I've had to learn when I get on these calls, um, I'll usually get activated
really.
on these calls because it's, and I mean, there's good therapists and there's good practitioners. Um, but the ones that seem to have some of the questions are, they're very much um, in their own head. Like for instance, so I'm learning IFS, internal family systems, and people like a few times people will get on and they're like, well, how does this model rank with? How would you interpret this through Union? Carl Jung's
Oh,
thing, and it's like, and he's so good because he's recognizing that they're coming at him with a part, right? And so we're going to talk about parts work in another few episodes because to me, it's been life changing to recognize. That's another thing is, I mean, I think in a lot of energy work, we're trying to get rid of parts. We're trying to change ourselves and become something different. And I just, like I said, it's my own bias. I really trust the journey. I trust the journey. And if you're suffering, then I'm going to be there with you. I want to be there with you, holding your hand during the suffering. I'm not going to just say, hey, this is just part of the journey. I'm going to care about your feelings. A good practitioner should care about your feelings and be with you in those feelings. But we're going to trust this process because I know at your core, you are all that you need. You have all that you need. You are whole, and divine at that core. And we're just going to practice meeting that part, that truth
mhm.
until it takes over, until it becomes, it's there all the time. But it was so interesting in this month's, they said, so you have the self, the biggest self, and then you have these, your parts. And the the goal is to just speak for your parts, not from your parts. So
Hmm.
you're really, this higher self is really, so when that activation happens, it's like, oh, I'm having activation, maybe this is just internally, but it's like, I'm having activation. Oh, that's sweet thing, like my little grandbaby, when he is learning to walk against the couch and he falls down and he cries, you know, I don't, it's, you pick him up and you love him and you say, oh, sweetheart, like, oh, I wouldn't say to him, well, that's what you do when you walk, you fall, like, no, I am with him in his little suffering. I don't need to make it a lesson, and we need to do that to ourselves. But we both have had experiences where it's gone, where it's been, when help has hurt, help has hurt. So,
Yeah, so I'm going to share a little bit about that experience. And maybe it's for me, so maybe I won't put it in here in the podcast. I don't know, but also just to see maybe how things can start out so good.
mhm,
And then all of a sudden these red flags come up. And especially if you haven't, maybe if you're listening to this podcast, you're well versed in energy work and energy healer. So you would see some of this stuff earlier, but I was completely new to all of
mhm,
it.
mhm,
So I was in the midst of postpartum.
mhm,
I don't know how I found this person, but I went to this foot zoner
mhm,
and it started out really good. And she would talk a little bit about some spiritual things,
mhm,
um, but it wasn't a ton. And
mhm,
then I noticed these little signs.
mhm,
Like she would talk to me about these things, and it was almost like she was like trying to get my validation for some of these things that she was talking
mhm,
about. So one day I said, does your husband ascribe to these things, these ideas that you're having?
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, no, not at all. And I have another husband prepared for me on the other side. And I was like, okay. She's like, yeah, he's there waiting. Like, we have a great relationship. It's like, oh, that is weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like the next couple times I go, she's like playing these church songs. And then she tells me that uh, that God told her that it wasn't supposed to be called foot zoning anymore, that she had to have her own special brand,
Mm-hmm.
and that she knows of these 13 stars that she's developing this curriculum about, and they represent the 13 apostles and Jesus. And she has gotten this download of this curriculum and how good it's going to be and how it's going to change everybody. And she's like, isn't that great? And I'm like, oh yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, she's telling me some things that I'm really feeling aligned with, that I feel like, gosh, why doesn't everybody else have this knowledge and this information kind of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
idea? And, felt like I was learning new things. I was being expanded.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to her house, and it was weird because I didn't ever really notice her house before, but she had a book by a certain author open on one nightstand. There was two on the stairs, and then one up in her room where we went and did the foot zoning.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt very placed for me. And it was about the end of days. It was this book by this woman about the end of days. And I started to get this feeling of nervous. And whenever people would talk about
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that, about like how horrible things are going to be and how you better prepare because you're a horrible person, and all of these kind of
Mm-hmm.
ideas.
You don't want to get caught being bad.
Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I looked at these books and I said, do you believe in these books? Like, and she said, oh yeah. She said, I got a download about a food storage
Mm.
container that I'm supposed to build. And so my husband's building it for me. And I'm like, wait, I thought you didn't like your husband. But anyway,
Yeah.
so he's building this like major food storage because the world is about to end.
Mm-hmm.
And about this time, my husband's coworker's wife died in childbirth, and she was a patron of this foot zoner as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this foot zoner finds me at the funeral, and she's like, yeah, I saw her at the side of the road. She knew she wasn't supposed to die, but I told her to go with Jesus, and she did. And I'm like, wow, like that is so cool.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it was almost like these little,
Mm-hmm.
I hate to say this because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
why me? Why did
Mm-hmm.
I matter? Why did she need me to believe
Mm-hmm.
all of this stuff? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all these little claws in me to get me to say, like, I believe everything that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Follow you. It was kind of the idea that I got.
Yeah.
One day I called her and I'm like, I'm just feeling really dark. And she's like, yeah, there's something in your house that's black. You've got to throw it away. There's an evil spirit in it. And I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, do you think I'm like walking around my house with her on the phone? And I'm like, is it this and this? She's like, it's that mirror. It was like this Walmart mirror. So she's like, you've got to throw it away.
Mm-hmm.
And then I called her another day and she was like, I was like, I'm not feeling great. And she's like, there is a demon screaming on your shoulder. Give me $100 and I'll get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had to write her out a check and put it in the mail so she'd get rid of this like supposed demon. And it was always this fear, right? I wasn't feeling good. So I'd go to her and she'd tell me how to fix it. And it was like, but I had to pay her for it. It was very confusing. And, after the food storage thing, I just thought, this is getting too weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, like you said, I took a break and I never went back.
Yeah.
After that, I got a little distance, but it took a little bit of rebuilding, honestly, after that whole experience to feel like I could have my own autonomy after someone telling me that they were doing all these things for me. But, as you were talking about some of those warning signs, all of those were there. I just didn't know that they were warning signs because it started out so good. It started out so good. And I felt like I was growing as a person, growing spiritually.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I think that's so helpful for you to share because I think I don't think you're alone. I think that has happened quite a bit, and because that's the thing is I'm saying like that little girl sat in that room and Jodi Hildebrandt was not there.
Right.
She had done what she needed, the training had happened, and so and that's where to me, it gets dangerous when our thoughts outside of even a session get overtaken by someone else's thoughts. Like that's not helpful, and so it's such a good example that you gave because you did kind of have a high and low you know, you had a high and low. What you know, and that's another sign. If you're roller coastering in your feelings, I would take a break. You know, if
Okay.
it's like, because that's like it's almost like a love bombing that narcissists do. You know, that's why people can get in these narcissistic relationships. It's because they love bomb them at first, you know,
That cycle
for
of abuse. You tear them
yes,
down, then you build, then you love bomb them.
yes,
Tear 'em down.
yes. So look out for that. But as you think back, um, so did you feel like, what did it feel like? Let's just get clear on what did it feel like in your body? Um, just kind of go through some of the sensations that you would have over the time, or you know, what comes up even now when you think about that. What are those sensations?
So it's, I'm glad you brought that up because at first it was almost a feeling of superiority. And I hate to
Hmm.
say that, but it was
Yeah,
like,
yep.
I know these secrets, not these secrets,
Hmm.
but these
Hmm.
extra things.
Hmm.
And it was like, gave me this little rush of power of like, wow,
Yes,
I know these things.
right.
And I hate to admit that because it, it
But it's so
was
true.
real. It was
It's
real.
so true. It's true. That was what I was trying to say, is like, oh great, we've got this magic. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
that's, it was like, oh yeah, this is good, you know.
Yeah. And it was
Yeah.
superiority. It was like this
Hmm.
hierarchy, right? I
Hmm.
going on this top tier. And I remember being like, why doesn't everybody else know this? Like, this is so great.
Hmm.
And then it created that dependency because I'd get into that fear cycle. Something would pop up and
Hmm.
I couldn't deal with it on my own. And it was always outside of me. And she
Hmm.
had to fix it. She had
Hmm.
to be the one to come in. So there was fear, a lot of fear.
Hmm.
I started to fear the end of days and like my food storage because of,
Yeah.
and I broke out in hives. I've broken out hives 2 times in my whole life.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, my body was like, hello, like,
Yeah.
listen up.
Right. Right.
So
And that's
yeah,
another thing to say, like, listen to your body. I mean, if your body was saying no, you know, our bodies don't lie, but
no,
but we don't trust our bodies because we make bodies bad. You know, your bodies are stinky, yucky, gross. But our bodies are our biggest tool. You know, they really are. So that's what a great body you had.
yeah.
You know, there that said, you know, no. Like it was like a hive is like, stop. You know, like stop. Like that is what hives do. You know, it's like, I'm allergic to this
Pay attention.
almost.
Yeah, pay
Yes.
attention.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so superiority, and then there was dependence and fear, you said.
Fear.
Yeah. Yeah. And um right, that this idea that like, again, like I said earlier, like this idea, like if I don't, then this. If,
Yeah.
you know, like if this doesn't happen, then there's, and like I say, I'm just saying, and it's my bias maybe, but it's like the journey. I trust the journey. You know what I
Right.
mean? I trust that that lady that passed away, it was okay for her to pass away.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have, I don't know if we have to have a time, you know, like I don't know if it's like her time. But I think, you know, I think it's like, you know, it's kind of like, again, we go back to kindergartners. It's like, so, oh, you lost your tooth in kindergarten, but she lost her tooth at first grade. Which one's better? Like, it just doesn't matter, right? It's like, it's not the most important thing. You know, because if you go to like an old cemetery and you look at those graves, you're not like, oh, they probably died too soon. You know what I mean? And you might be like, oh, there's a baby, that's so sad, but you're not activated by it at all.
Yeah.
You're not activated by their death.
Mm.
And so and so, you know, not that we don't grieve and stuff when somebody dies, but I trust people's journeys. You know, I trust him. I trust the journey. And so if we have to do this to make sure this happens, you know, whatever that is, if it's, I've got to prepare for the end of times, I got to do this for that. I've got to make sure you know, again, like even with, we've talked about this too. Like I've even been a little resistant to even like, I got to clear myself, you know, because that feels like somebody else has more power than I do. And I struggle with that because I don't, because you can just get on a slippery slope that way. And so I had to be taught differently, where I think of it as just, I think we talked about the other episode is like, you think of it as hygiene. It was just like, oh, I just gotta, my energy, I just gotta clean my energy. It's not like, oh no, I have this dark energy.
Yes.
It's not like if you've gone and worked in the yard, you're like, oh no, my hands are dirty. Like, oh no, you just go wash your hands.
Well, and tell about what that new guy that you just hired, kind of how his attitude towards it.
Yeah, it
was
was really interesting. Yeah, he's in the business of clearing energy fields. That's what he does. And it was just, I'd listened to my intuition to make the appointment. And I was all excited about it. The morning of, I was nervous because I was like, if we start going in this direction, like I'm not going to do well, like I'm not going to do well. But he was very much like about, just that idea of like, there's things we just got to clear away. Very much like, when you go out in the garden, you get dirty, you just got to wash it off. It's not like we have these dark spirits that just cling on to us and
torment us.
Yeah, torment us. Yeah, that it's like it was a totally different thing. And what I loved is he said, he's like, here's the thing, I'm a skeptic. It's like, I'm a skeptic. He's like, he works with like him and his partner. His partner's like a NASA scientist, it's like, he's like, I am a skeptic, but there's just, we just need, I think maybe one day we'll have like an X-ray machine or some kind of a machine that we can see, energy. And there's just some energy, like, again, when you go into like a Walmart, and you've got people have got their lists and they're very much like, I got to do this. I got to hurry. I'm late. This, all of that energy. It's not bad, evil energy. It's just that hurry, that feeling gets on you. You know what I mean? It's like people are like, oh, that's too expensive. I mean, there's just a lot of
Kids crying.
right, kids crying. Yeah, exactly. And so it's just a matter of, okay, I need to just like take a little energy shower, and wash those hands so that I can just be in my own energy. And I think we're meant to exchange energy and things like that, I mean, yeah, and that's what sometimes, again, on the opposite end, some practitioners, they take on the person's energy, and that's why the person feels so good when they leave, because the practitioner is taking on the energy, and that's a whole nother conversation to have. That's not helpful for the practitioner. But for right now, we don't have that special machine.
Mm-hmm.
and we just, are depending on where we're at, we just, we just don't know that, maybe you get in the car and you're like, oh man, I need a little nap, like, or I'm tired, or you just say, maybe you pick up a candy bar on the checkout line, trying to get that energy back, that maybe was lost or is heavy, right? So we use these other methods to energize ourselves, because we don't have a system that says, hey, energy matters. It flows.
Yeah.
Those are, we don't tie the energy with emotions or thoughts. And they are very much tied, they are very much tied to it.
Yeah. And I loved kind of what as he was like, yeah, you just get this done. But also he did not pressure you. He did not say, don't do this, then
right,
things will happen. He was like, this is your choice. And I loved that. Like you said, you almost had to convince him to say, okay, how do I sign up?
Yeah. I was recommended him by Lisa Campion, who we did a podcast with, and I just love her. And she, she was just like, yeah, here's my guy. I love him. He's, so she sent me his information, and I got on a free call. It was a free call. Didn't cost me anything to have it, and we just talked. We just had a really good conversation, and before, like, so I said that morning I was a little nervous, so a few minutes before I did some tapping. I tapped all my feelings out. I was like, okay, this is what I'm nervous about these things. And by expressing those feelings, like halfway through tapping, I just went, okay, here I am, like, it was like, okay, those feelings are valid, but I don't make decisions from those feelings. They're not who I truly am. So I started to feel better and just, grabbed an oil, really wanted to center myself so that I wasn't coming from this negative place, or is that because I was nervous. And so when I talked to him, we just had a really good conversation, and his website, it's like, there's not clear what he kind of does, but I trust Lisa. So and then talking with him, I really kept checking in, to how I felt, checking into my body, like, I'm very practiced at that, like, and I don't think I asked him a question, because, he's like saying, I do all this work, you gotta, so he's very much an energy clearer, energy, what is it like? Your energy field, he does that work. And I asked him, at one point, he says, would you call yourself an optimist? Because I think, and he laughed. He's like, what question, what he says, and I didn't know that I was asking him this question as like a little test until later. Like, it just came out naturally, but it was kind of a test, because if he's telling me all these difficult things, you would think he would have like, his life would be difficult, but he said, but his answer was, I wouldn't call myself an optimist. He's like, I'm not, he's like, look, there's plenty of people that are way more optimistic than me, but I'm pretty optimistic. And that's the thing, is like, my question kind of was like, because it sounds like the woman you worked with, I mean, it was just all around her, the negativity was just all around her. And
that she was the only cure, though.
She was the only cure. And, and spreading that fear, and so that question kind of asked him, was kind of, like I say, it was totally subconscious until later I realized, I'm like, oh, that was like a little test, to where it was like, is he going to be like, well, I just have to do all this. I don't know what I was expecting, but his answer was great. He was just like, there's people that are way more optimistic than me, but yeah, like, the world, people are good. Like, he still had this trust in goodness, rather than, we've got to do this or else. You know what I mean? And he was very much like, if it doesn't resonate, then great. Like, he's like, I'm not going to tell you for you to expect, it should be, you should get what if it feels good for you, then that's it. That's great. So I'm really excited I get to talk to him again. And it just really, those are the kind of people that are like my people. Like, they hold the spectrum of emotions. They're not just, here's what you do, follow me.
They're not
it's
pulling you along. It's like you said before, they're on a journey with you. They're
mm-hmm.
standing next to you.
Yep.
Yeah, they're not pushing you or pulling you.
Not fear-based.
Yeah.
Not fear-based. And also, the other thing I thought about is, if you're with a practitioner and they're using vocabulary that you don't understand, that's a red flag to me, like, because sometimes, I mean, for me, in my, it's like, they're like, your aura and this, if you don't understand the language, maybe take some time and learn the language, but don't just buy into it. You know what I mean? If you don't know what that stuff is, if you don't know what they're talking about, then you have a different journey to go on first. If anything, like, there's things to learn, because that can happen too. I remember when I first came into this world, I would hear somebody say, you just got to let go, like they would, like, you've just got to let go. You've got to let go and be free, and there'd be this whole talk about letting go. And then another person would come up and say, like, you've got to take what you want and you've got to grasp it with both hands. Those were opposite things.
Yeah.
And it was like, what does that mean? So the thing I had to learn early on was, who I am matters. So if it resonates, in some cases, you have to recognize when you're going to grab onto something and take it, and grab it, or you're going to let go. That is an internal decision.
Okay.
That I don't know if somebody else tells you, hey, you just need, I mean, maybe in certain contexts, like I say, that's the hardest part about this, is like both, one thing can be both good and bad. It just depends on the intention, and we have, so that's why we have to, that's why we do the meditation, that's why we do the card pulling, that's why we do whatever we got to do to have access to our own self, so we can trust ourselves, so that when that comes up, we can feel that feeling of like, no, this isn't good, this isn't going to work for me.
Right.
And or yeah, and that's the thing too, it can just be like, oh, maybe another time. Like, we don't have to like argue with the person or tell them they're wrong. We can just say, I've got to think about that. I need some time to think. If they're pressuring you into buying a package or something, it's okay for you to say, I'm just going to need some time. And then if they push even further, then it's no,
Right.
it's a no. But I'm always, I'm going through this thing where I think, this pull yourself up by your bootstraps and muscle on and push forward. I feel like to me, it's just some old technology. We don't, there's not, I think it's time to kind of just be aware of where we're at, and I mean, and that's what I say when it comes to that suffering. There was a lot of my suffering was because I didn't think I wasn't supposed to suffer. Like that's where most of my suffering came from, was like resistance, instead of saying to myself, I am suffering and this hurts. And then of course, then it comes up to like, we're not supposed to suffer. So I'm all isolated and alone. Like, we need to be there for other people. We need to allow people's suffering to not activate us, to be with them. Because I felt very alone, like I couldn't talk to people, or that people were, that, well, if I would talk to them, they would give me an answer as to what they do, or, but they didn't have the problem I had, like they didn't have my problem. And so it just became very isolating and alone. And so it was so nice to have, when I went to my first energy session, and when she's like, what are you working on today, or what would you like to work on? And my answer was, I'm just curious. Like, I wasn't going to tell her my problems, because it was like, I had to see if this was safe. And then at the end of the session, she's like, is there anything else? And I just like sobbed, and I'm like, that's when I told the whole story. And the most healing moment in that whole session was when there wasn't a change. Her demeanor did not change.
That's holding space, right? That's
She was just holding space,
standing next to you on your journey. It's
yeah. And driving home from that session, it was the first time I thought I can be okay. And it wasn't necessarily the Reiki session. It was just her not speaking from her parts, right? Being with me in my parts. That's what I was paying for. That's what I was paying for. And so coaches and therapists and energy healers, they are there to kind of push you into healing, but not in a way that's
well, don't they just, it's not even push. They're showing you a way that you can, if you want to.
Right.
They're not, there should be no pushing or pulling.
Right.
In my experience.
Right. And pushing out of your comfort zone, like, yeah, you don't want to stay in your comfort zone, but you should be empowered to step out of your comfort zone.
And if you're empowered, you're doing it, not them.
Yes. And so that's a very different dynamic, empowered versus power.
Yeah.
Like, because some of those, like your practitioners wanted to show her power. She wasn't about empowering.
No, she
wasn't about empowering. Yeah. She was her ego was getting fed by her power. And the more power she got, I had a colleague, a friend, and I had gone to her for a couple sessions, but she had like and this was when I was very beginning, and I didn't think I had any gifts, but these
Mhm.
people, like, they were claiming their gifts, they were just like, and you were like, wow, I was like in awe, right?
Yeah.
But she had this woman convinced. She was a woman in her late 30s, not married, and, said, okay, well, you've got to quit your job, sell your house, sell all your stuff. That's how you got to find your husband. And she did. And I just went, what? And that's when I'm like, I never want to do that to someone. I never want to make a decision for them. I just don't. It's, to me, that's just not trust. It's like, and there's a point of just apathy. It's not apathetic, just, oh, well, whatever happens will happen. It's not apathetic, but it's not anxious either. It's not quid pro quo. If I do this, then that will happen. It's not the slot machine. Wait,
Yes.
it's not the slot machine, or you don't earn wealth. I mean, not wealth, health and well-being. You don't earn it.
In token, you don't earn your suffering either. So I think sometimes
Right.
in that mode, you're thinking, oh, what did I do to
Mhm.
deserve this?
Yep.
And
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the lesson. Like, I think I told you, I was sitting and driving in the car, and I was just like, I'm so sick of this. Like, I was just having this internal conversation in my head, just like, I don't know what this is going to be like. I hate it. I don't like this. This is a roller coaster ride. It wasn't, I didn't even say that word, but later, I mean, I heard like, this voice, almost my own voice, come into my brain and stop that thought process that said, isn't it great?
hmm,
And I was like, what? And I knew it was like, it's like, part of what being human is living in this tension,
hmm,
living in the unknown. Um, that's something that is unique to being a human. Our humanness is just, like, again, if you're watching kindergartners and they're pushing each other, and to the kid, they're like, he pushed me. It's like the end of their world, but you're like, that's so sweet. Like, we don't have this like nervousness about they better learn, their lessons quick because they're in kindergarten. They've got to learn it now. Like, there's just no expectation for growth. It's just experience. And I really feel like that's how it is for us. Like, every experience is helpful, and and the suffering is suffering. Like, you can know that being pushed down, you don't like that. It's not like you're going to say, oh, you're not hurt. Like, their little knees all bleeding. You're like, oh, that doesn't hurt. It does. I'm not going to say that it doesn't hurt.
yeah,
Um, it's like, that's where it's like, when we're suffering, we need help.
right.
We need help. We need somebody to walk with us. And so,
And so, yeah, I just want to give gratitude to that lady because had I not had that experience, I wouldn't have known how to trust myself.
yeah,
It was really important for me to learn that, and
yep,
I don't want to ever do it again. But
right.
I'm going to give gratitude for that.
And that's where it, even for myself, like, I can look back at my suffering and it's like, yeah, it was helpful. Like, in the moment, it's not that way, but you do. That's how you're in growth, is when you have a complexity of
Yeah,
feelings about it, the complexity. And we want to simplify things. That's the problem.
you want to make
We,
it black or white.
we want to have the mirror be dark, and we get rid of the mirror and all of everything's okay. Like,
Mhm.
that's a very simple thing to do. But the truth is, we live in a complexity.
Yeah.
It's like trying to force a rainbow to be back, one color. It's just, we have the rainbow, we have all the colors,
Mhm.
and that's okay. That's in some of those colors we don't like, right? Like, but we experience them all. And so the complexity, and that is true gratitude when it is in that complex, because again, you're like, I don't want to do that again. But
Right.
but there is that gratitude, and those get so intertwined, like in our episode on Inside Out too.
Oh,
That's just the truth, right? That's when you kind of know you're in the right places, when you have more of a complexity than a simplistic view.
oh, I like it.
Our parts are simple, but our biggest self, it's creative, it's calm, it's courageous. It's got all, it's, to be calm and courageous at the same time. those feel like it's complex.
Yeah.
It's a complex.
When most people are asked what they want, they will answer, I want to be happy. But happy takes practice. And that's what the Wholeness Library is all about. So check it out free at thewholenessnetwork.com.
Are you frazzled and overwhelmed by the world today? Grab a cup of tea and let's turn the conversation to you. I'm Cynthia Ocelli. As an author and life coach, I've helped thousands of people reclaim their power and harness it to create their dreams. In my podcast, Rewritten with Cynthia Ocelli, we will focus on what you do have control over, your life. Listen now on the mindbodyspirit.fm podcast network or wherever you get your podcasts.